Hello and welcome everyone again to this series with Leaders I Love, where I get to talk to the leaders who I personally love. And this interview today is a really special one because I am talking with a very dear friend of mine, Ant Ward. We went to school together back in the day, which is, 25 years ago, a long time ago. And we have also worked together over the last few years. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about how we came to work together before we dive into the questions and get to the heart of Ant. So first, thanks, Ant, for agreeing to speak with me and being here today.
No, thank you.
So Ant will tell you a little bit more about this, but when he was about 37, 3 years ago, he was diagnosed with bowel cancer. So I can't even imagine what would be going through someone's mind, heart, and body with that kind of diagnosis. But all I knew was that at the time I had trained to be a yoga and meditation teacher. And I knew that meditation practice could be and has the power to be extremely healing. So without talking to Ant, I took it upon myself and wrote a custom yoga nidra meditation for Ant and sent it to you. And I think you were in hospital at the time. And I do remember you saying a little while later that it really helped with the pain and it really helped you to sleep. And I think that experience of meditation and mindfulness was potentially the turning point for you in terms of your journey into the world of mindfulness and really reconnecting with yourself. And that's what we're going to explore more of today. In terms of who Ant is as a leader, he was only 30 when he co-founded his business, 5/8 Distribution. And since then, over the last 10 or 11 years, has grown it to be the business it is today, an extremely successful business, notwithstanding the fact that Ant needed to step out for quite a wee while in order to recover himself. And I'm so delighted that you are here healthy and happy today to talk to us about your journey and yourself as a leader. So thanks again, Ant.
Thank you. No, it's exciting for me just to catch up because we don't catch up enough because we are good buddies. And even more so to actually have a forum to talk about wellness because they're sort of few and far between for me, to be honest. So no, I'm excited.
Awesome. You're so right. I think at the moment through this COVID crisis and experience that we all have been through and are still in, there is more and more of a wave of well-being that is washing over all of us. And we're all experiencing that in different ways. But if we can create these forums to talk about it, not just what we should be doing, but actually talk to the people who are doing it, who can share their experiences and the benefits that it provides, then I think that's really powerful. And I know that's what you can do with us today. And I think a great place to start with you, and I can say this because we've been friends for a long time, is that in years gone by, you would not have been described as someone who was a mindful practitioner, certainly not someone that did meditation. And you've been really frank with me in the past, and you've said that you used to consider mindfulness as unproductive and a waste of time. So I'd love for you to tell us about the impact that mindfulness practices have had on you personally and your business.
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit embarrassing that I was that naive when I was younger, but it definitely pushed me to do some amazing things. But you know, it had a bit of a price to pay at the end. But so for me, when we were starting 5/8 and just throughout my university days, my career, it's for me, every second needed to be productive. And I'd been, and you know this better than anyone, that it really felt like I'd been wired like that from really, really early. And I don't think it was others around me, and maybe it was, but it was definitely myself. All of the expectations I had placed on myself. And look, when we started 5/8, it really was hold on for the ride. And I put huge expectations on myself, and downtime was just not an option. Downtime for me was going to the gym and stupidly working out as hard as I could. I used to laugh at people that would stand and talk to each other. And I used to think I had all the answers, and I used to think, gosh, what, they're just wasting their time while I'm cranking out a workout, and as you'd expect, grabbing a quick coffee as I raced out the door of the workout to get to my meeting or to get to my next thing that I was trying to achieve. And so, yeah, I was the opposite of what I've learned and practiced over the last 3 years. And a big part of that is us reconnecting, because we really hadn't, I suppose, hung out a lot until 3 years ago. We knew each other really well, and obviously we're great friends, but careers and lives take on different paths, don't they? And we hadn't seen each other sort of consistently. And so, yeah, it was a major change, and it's a lifelong change. It's not a get through this period. It's a complete change of mindset and change of lifestyle. So I think the other part of your question was around how this has changed me, I suppose, in my work life as well. And I'm sort of happy to talk about that. You know, the key things for me is, you know, the career path I had taken had been, well, still is successful, but it can be successful in lots of different ways. It doesn't need to be successful in the bulldozing way that we were. When we started our business, it would work. It was just about how, and we would do anything and everything to make it successful. And we were not particularly great to our staff, and it was all about results. And if you didn't like the culture, you know, don't let the door hit you on the bum on the way out, was sort of the philosophy. And we thought that was how you ran businesses. And I think the more modern movement is changing that. And I'm really really happy that I'm hopefully helping lead that movement, that you can be a leader and an owner or a manager or a dad or whatever, and lead from your heart and lead from good values, rather than lead from a sort of a hierarchical ego perspective. Because the exciting thing about it is, it's not about lowering your ability to do your job. It's actually more empowering, and it actually creates better results. And I'm finding that, and it's so cool to get to a stage where you thought you knew everything and you knew nothing. In the last 3 years, it's not about changing for me, it's actually changing the people around me. And that's been really exciting.
And I think perhaps it's not necessarily changing the people around you, it's actually giving them an awareness and a pathway to connect to what's already there within them and with all of us. And it's just like you said, those expectations that you put on yourself and expectations that we accept from other people, that layer upon layer on top of us and shield us and shield from our view the potential that is within us, which actually is a stillness and a beautiful essence within all of us. So I think it's so devastating what you had to go through. But as so many people who go through cancer and other trauma say, you know, it is like a wake-up call, isn't it? And all of a sudden, you know, you might not have changed your values necessarily, and we'll talk about that, but you start to realize the importance of certain ones and certain practices. And like you say, it's a journey and it's a way of being, this mindfulness business. You know, it's not something to tick off the list as you might have considered it back in the day. It really is, it's all encompassing, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. You know, you talk about how you act in your own private life, and, you know, so, and I also felt that a lot of the time early in my career or when I was starting, was you sort of put on a persona of what people expected of you when you walked in. And if you were the employee or the assistant, that was your role, and you acted like that role. And then all of a sudden you own a business, so you're like, gosh, I better act like a big businessman, and I better you know, act like I see other people around me act. And the one thing I started figuring out over the last 3 years is, there's a really great saying of, how you're in one way is how you are in every way, or something to that effect anyway. So how you conduct yourself outside of your work environment, and how you go about things is going to directly impact on how you are in the workplace. And you should bring all those values from your time with your family and the things that you do in your own time. You should bring them to the workplace. And so I've started finding some of these really cool practices that you really helped me get into have had huge impacts, and they're not direct linear lines. You can't say this will impact that. It's a way of living that starts coming out in how you deal with people. And and I do some things that some people look at and think are a bit odd, or and maybe they're curious about, but as some examples, that we started with looking at yoga, and you set me on my yoga journey, which was amazing, and that will be with me forever. That's an important part of my life now. But then it makes you curious about other things, and I started figuring out, because I went through a lot of discomfort 3 years ago, and I also, and you'd think that was all negative, but there was huge positives to that. And I found that when you go into those discomforting times, you start really respecting all sorts of things. You start respecting just waking up and feeling free and with energy and without pain. And so I've started over the last couple of years actually finding ways to sort of put myself in controlled discomfort in a way. And so I do what might be considered some silly things, like I make sure I make myself have a cold shower in the morning, and I do ice baths and different things. And the whole idea around that is there is some talk around the scientific side of it, of the health side, but for me it's a mental thing. If I can do that in the morning, that's your first hurdle you've jumped, and the rest of the day, if you can breathe your way through that, you can breathe your way and keep still and very clear mind through other things that happen in the day. Because as you know, you get thrown all these things that seem like they are the deal breaker, biggest, hugest catastrophes every day, and they're not. And it's all about perspective. And if you can get your way through those, it's about finding ways to embed them into your everyday life, so that these things don't knock you off your center, that you can have a steady head, and all of a sudden you find your staff around you start having steady, and they start attacking problems in a different way. And it's not about shouting or carrying on about it. It's about clearly thinking and being strategic. And that's really cool when you start seeing people around you absorbing some of those some of those skills, really.
Oh my God, there's so much gold in there. Talking about, who you are as a leader and bringing your whole self to work. Brené Brown says, who you are is how you lead. And that is so important. It's so true, but we need to have businesses and workplaces that welcome the whole person in. And I think that's clearly what you're doing, and what many more people are starting to do. And you talked about, having a new perspective. These practices have shown you a new way, showing you that mindfulness is not unproductive. In fact, it's extremely productive. And you've started to talk about how that has affected your business and the people around you. You talked about their steadiness. So I'm wondering how your practices and how this perspective that you have gained has fortified you and your business for stability and calm and hope, particularly through COVID-19.
Yeah, well, like we were talking about, I think earlier, it's not my first rodeo, and it's not something I wish on anyone to go through a huge upheaval of your life, because it's extremely daunting and extremely tough. But it does teach you a whole lot of things, and you tend to look back and go, "Well, gosh, I got through that, and I was better for it. So what am I worried about?" And so when I was diagnosed in 2017, I had to walk into my staff and say, it was after I'd had my operation and stuff, because I got rushed in to get everything done. And they saw me sort of at my, it's probably my most vulnerable I've been. I never let my guard down in front of them. I was always this stoic sort of unflappable sort of character. And it's pretty tough to be that when you walk in and you're 10 kgs lighter, and you just don't look like you used to. I probably still sounded like I used to, but I'd clearly been impacted. And it was hard to do, but it was really really valuable, because the staff, my staff and my other owners looked at me and thought, okay, he's not going to be back here for a while, and he's being pretty brave sitting in front of us. And that taught me some huge things around leaders now being vulnerable and being open about their feelings, and rather than being that person that's just sort of got that poker face the whole time. And for me, that showed that as soon as you bring yourself down to a relatable level with your staff, you see some absolute gold that can come out of them, because all of a sudden they're like, gosh, you've gone through some stuff as well. I thought I was doing it tough. You've done it really tough. You're totally relatable now. And you're willing to talk about how hard that was. And not many owners or bosses or whatever managers will do that, because they see that as weakness. And it's the exact opposite, because by bringing that honesty to the table, you all of a sudden get a lot of honesty back, and you get buy-in. And you can't, you can only get that one way, and it's through trust. And you can build trust in different ways, but honesty and vulnerability are amazing ways to build trust with your staff. And then they start taking ownership and really stepping up. And so that's what happened. I took a whole year off work, a whole entire financial year. And it was quite nice after a year, because we could start joking about a few things. And all I wanted, I think I told you as well, all I wanted after a year was to just not talk about what went on. I just wanted to be normal again, and just to be honest, just to have some of the banter that used to go on with my close friends, and to have that jovial, relaxed nature. And it was fun, because the other directors would start having a good joke. So we had one of our best years ever when I wasn't there, one of our most profitable years. And the old me would have taken that as a huge blow to the ego. And through our sort of year of working on me, I took that as a huge, I suppose, a huge, just sort of represented what we'd built. And we'd built people that could step up, and they had a real goal, because they had me going through all sorts of different things, and they were like, we have to step up, and we've got to make it work. And that was cool. That was really exciting, and it was a huge eye-opener for me, that it wasn't about me, it was about the collective. And I wasn't really the main reason. It was that drove everything forward. There was amazing other talented people around me, and that was fine, and I should be happy about that. That's great. And so that was some of the things that came out of it. And that was exciting. And we since then have had a culture of trying to get people to step up into their roles, and trying to share that workload a bit more, and not having all of that daunting expectation and pressure on a couple of people. Because that stress can lead to things that can lead to health outcomes.
Yeah, as you well knew. I think that's really selfless leadership, and you were so brave to go in there 10 kgs lighter, looking and feeling different. And you talked about how some leaders, not you, but some leaders may have considered that a weakness, or seen your weakness there. But I think when we think about weakness in that way, there's often a sense of shame associated with weakness, and we all feel shame. It's a human condition that most people don't want to talk about. The antidote to shame is empathy. And so actually what you did was you took yourself in there in a completely vulnerable state, and you de-armored yourself, which meant taking off any sense of shame or fear, and allowed yourself to be vulnerable, and therefore opened yourself up for your team and your colleagues to connect to you and with you with empathy. And I mean, that just builds the most powerful culture, and I think, you know, you've articulated it so well there. And I think the other thing is being really clear on your values, and you and I did some work in the early days on values, and so I'd love to ask how your values emerged and created anchorage for you through that time, through your cancer.
That was really interesting, the values piece, because you go about life and you don't think about what your values are. You just do. You're just on that treadmill of just doing, and never really. And I definitely didn't stop. I was probably started my business just because it was probably the most. It was the thing, I suppose, that I thought was the biggest challenge, and I never really thought about why. And then when you sat down with me and started talking about values, that was really powerful, because that really challenged me to think really deep down what were my values. And initially, I suppose for a long time, those were created by what was around me, and what was around me was to be successful and to showcase that success. And to showcase that success often would be, how many staff have you got? What revenue is your business doing? What car are you driving? Have you got a new house? And I was whether I liked it or not, I was well entrenched in that, and it was that, you know, that was life. And what happened really quickly is when we sat down together and we actually challenged that and said, what really are your values? And admittedly, it was great timing, because I'd had a lot of time to reflect, and I wasn't caught up in the corporate, the everything around it. I only had one target, and that was to get better. And that was really quite liberating to completely unclutter your life, and all you had was to get through this next period. But what I found was there was way deeper things I could get out of it, and a lot more value I could get out of that time. It wasn't just about getting through it. That's all everyone talks about. How you going? Oh gosh, how many cycles you got left in your chemo? I bet you can't wait till the end. And I sort of felt like saying, actually, there's some parts of this journey that I'm actually really enjoying, because you can't, you know, it's the worst thing you could do is always wish for tomorrow and thinking about I'm going to be happy when I get to here. And when we talked about the values, it wasn't when I started, and we did it visually, didn't we, if I remember correctly? And I remember being really interested that the material things and the money and that just didn't even factor. And as we started pulling out these different visual cues, it was far more about connection and nature, and health was an obvious one. These other things that I hadn't really thought about ever before, but were in there, and were things that I did value, that I suppose I'd never really just sat down and considered those and focused on those. And that was great. And it was a huge part of what I'm doing now, and what I have done for the last 2 years. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because it was hugely empowering to me.
So how have you leaned into your values through this particular COVID crisis? Because as you say, you know, we're all busy focusing on COVID-19 at the moment, but this isn't your first rodeo with crisis. You've been leaning into your values for a long time, but how have they really helped to fortify you and give you direction through this particular crisis?
Yeah, it's definitely, I felt quite calm. I remember sitting. One of the things I've done over the last couple of years, I've joined a men's group, and I'd recommend that. This is sort of off topic, but I recommend that for any leader. Amazingly humbling experience, because you walk in, there is essentially no hats and nobody. It's really it's something I've done for the last few years, and it's been hugely empowering. But we would sit, it's like a circle. We would sit normally every week together, and we couldn't do that, so we're on a Zoom call. And I remember the guys it was us collecting straight after COVID had started and going, man, how's everyone going? And the first thing I said is, this feels really, this is going to sound unusual, guys, but this feels so familiar. And it was probably quite nice to give some of the other guys there some perspective on it, because I said, look, I have done this. I had to socially isolate when I was doing my treatment, because most people know that your immunity reduces and your white blood cell count will just reduce naturally by the treatment you have. And so I had to distance myself from my kids and my wife quite a lot. And that was far, far more difficult because the world was still turning and the world was still buzzing, and it was still, you could look out the window and people would, and for me at that stage of my life, I was so hungry for success and everything else, you would naturally feel like this is holding you back. And so that sort of gave me, it was helpful, because when the COVID lockdown happened, it for me was settling for me that we had done this together as a family, and so as a family we felt really quite calm about it. And some of those, and I was just so happy I'd done the work over the last couple of years that you'd set me off on, because it gave me all these amazing tools that I wasn't learning for the first time. These were tools I loved doing, and so it's so much easier to lean on these tools when you've done them and you understand them and you know that they are helpful, rather than trying to kickstart these things when you're in crisis. And I think that's a really huge thing to learn, is that don't practice mindfulness when your business is going through huge upheaval. Practice it when it's good. Get together and talk to people, and I think it's good in personal and your work life. When things are good, work on what on yourself or the business, so that when it does turn, you're really strong. And so I had heaps of time, which was great, and time is everything for me. And so time to meditate, time to do my yoga, time to actually, and the one of the things I always remember is you talking to me about mindful walking. And I just laughed, because I was like, what are you talking about, Tui? And I was like, you either exercise or you're doing something else. There's nothing, you don't just wander. I'm not it's something you do when you're a child. And I did it, and I was like, this is really quite powerful. And that was really a real opener. And we do have our staff go and do that a lot now, and embrace it. Don't see it as, it's because when you have trust in your staff, it's not staff skiving off. It's actually them going, I need a break, and I'll come back and I'll be clear and have be back into what I'm doing. So it felt like those tools were so helpful. And as you do with your family and children, it's so rewarding when you start seeing them embracing some of those tools as well, and seeing benefit. And they're awesome, because they can teach us amazing things, because we teach them that some of the mindfulness and stuff, and they're like, no, but I just want to dance or I want to sing. And you're like, that's right, that's also really cool. And that's hugely helpful for your stress levels and everything else. And so incorporating some of that into our day is, I've had to start dropping my guard and being okay to feel like a bit of a dork, and be a dad that's happy to have a dance with his kids and a sing and do those sort of things that the previous dad was like, I'm a professional, I go to work, and when I come home I'm doing something else that is in extending our future or future prospects. And what that taught me is you actually need to have some of the time that's that real fun time, which you're really good at infusing into what you do. It's not just about the strategy and this and that. It's about actually what you can do to infuse fun and a bit of lightness into your everyday life.
100%. And I'll give you a little bit of on-the-spot coaching, because when you talk about, just letting loose a bit and dancing with your kids, if I remember correctly, one of the visuals that you put into your vision board around values was around music and dance parties. Right. So actually, by letting loose that, whole status or role of the professional and just letting go and dancing with your kids, you're actually leaning into and living one of your values just like that. So that's really powerful, and kids have a lot to teach us. And I love what you said about really practicing and getting good with these tools when the going is good. And of course, I do that with my kids. One of the things that we do around the dinner table, and we've done it for years, is we all go around the table and we say one thing that we're grateful for today. And so what that's doing as kids and me and, their dad as well, is rewiring the circuitry in our brain to actually feel and be and become naturally more grateful people. So when the going gets tough, what we did is we reframed lockdown to home retreat, and we talked about why we're so grateful to be able to retreat. And the girls understood that practice because we do it all the time. We already were doing it. So I think that's really great advice that you've got for people. And sure, if people aren't practicing mindfulness or emotional agility or resilience practices at the moment, you know, it's still a good time to start small. But as you say, you know, still also do it when times are good. And you said at the very beginning, it's a lifelong practice. You don't just start it. It's not a fair weather friend. So I think you've got some really great advice there. And also, I just want to tell you, I was a little bit strategic with that walking meditation for you because, as you just said and pointed out, one of your values is nature. And so actually getting you being mindful and meditating out in nature again connects you to one of your values. And I put a little song in there into your walking meditation, and one of your values was music. So there's always strategy to these things. Now, one of the other tools that we have worked on together and that I offer people is strengths-based leadership development. And so you and I did that together. We won't go into all the ins and outs, but I'd love you to share perhaps how your understanding of your strengths has helped, and maybe an example of how you've aimed one of your strengths towards business challenges in COVID.
Yeah, that was really interesting doing that with you as well, because I think we often look at our weaknesses and how we can. This was so empowering when we did this together. There was so many light bulb moments, and probably because I was in a great space to receive, I think, at that stage. And yeah, a lot of the time you're like, what can I do to improve this weakness? And you're like, don't worry about that. Let's just focus on what you're really good at and your strengths, and accentuate those and really play to those strengths. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's easy. I can do that. And maybe I can be proud of doing that, as opposed to, and maybe not just sort of be, it's hard to explain, but just embrace it. And so for me, that futuristic view and that strategic view and understanding how to drive towards results in the future was a big strength of mine. And I think the key for me was just not being in that space the whole time, finding times to be in that space, because I tended to be in that space all the time. And so the monkey mind would go all the time, you know, like thinking. And so I've found ways to dip out of that, but then also it's actually a strength. And so I do need to embrace it, not completely veer away from it. And so going through COVID, it was really quite confronting for a lot of our staff, because we were caught in the middle, really, where our business was an essential business. And so we're expected to operate. And as a business owner, we were like, well, thank goodness we might have some sort of business happening through that period. But it was hugely confronting for our staff, because whether it's essential or not, they still had to go into a work environment that they were really unsure about. And so for me, it was actually having that ability to not worry about what the short-term impacts on our business were, and to not push those worries onto my staff. It wasn't about, oh, guys, this is so horrible or anything. It's about, guys, we're going to get through this because we play the long game, and actually have that ability to look at where are we going to be in 2 years, and not where are we going to be in 2 weeks. And I think that was really key and very challenging, because everything up until this date, apart from when I got diagnosed, has been very much, I've always thought I knew how it was going to, I'd have this vision of where we're going to be, and would know sort of how it would get there. It wouldn't be super linear, but there'd always be a way to get there. And the pandemic situation was harder, because everything was changing daily. So you didn't really know where it was all heading. We probably still don't really know where it's all heading. So you've got to be really happy to flow. It's a really key principle I brought into my life as well, and one that you encouraged with me as well. Rather than being, if it doesn't go this way, then my life's going to end. I'm just, totally tips you off your center. So for us, that looking to the future rather than just short term was key, and we kept all of our staff. And one of the big things for me was that and I shared with my staff is we're going to get through this short, tough period, and I want all of you amazing people by my side because we're going to drive out of this stronger than ever. And rather than consolidating like other companies will probably do because they have to, and then having to rebuild out of that, I believe that it will be far stronger and better for it. And we keep everyone employed as well, which is obviously huge for anyone personally, that you've got that job safety.
Yeah.
So that value was important for me. The other value that came up was competitiveness. And again, some of these values for a little bit, I tried to step away from when I went through my recovery, because I sort of started figuring out that maybe some of these values drove me to push myself too hard. And maybe that was, you never know, but maybe that was a reason why that I sort of fell ill. And but what you reminded me as well is that's a big strength. It's just about refocusing on that in a really healthy way. And that competitiveness is important. And so when COVID hit, I was like, this isn't going to stop us. This is just another bump in the road. We've been through all sorts of stuff since we started our business. We've been through the global financial crisis, the Christchurch earthquakes, and even though that was in Christchurch, that had huge impacts on the economy and our business. We went through a major illness for myself, which was a big thing for our business. And so you start getting perspective that you can get through these things, and especially if you're competitive, because you're like, this isn't going to stop me.
Yeah.
And you hopefully infuse that through your staff in a nice way, not a combative or sort of, nothing. It's in a way that's measured, and they buy into that as well, and they actually believe you rather than thinking that you're just saying what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, the whole strengths piece is extremely believable, because 90% of the Fortune 500 companies use this, and over 20 million people around the world have done their strengths assessments. So it's extremely reliable and credible. And I think, what you were referencing there is that when you aim your strengths with intention towards a goal or a challenge or a desire, then you can be really smart and sophisticated about how you use your strengths. And so I want to talk a little bit about desires, because that's another part of the puzzle, another piece of the puzzle that we've worked through together. When we're anchored into our values and aim our strengths towards our desires, that's when we create a really clear vision for how we want to show up in work and in life. And I know you've done this work, so I'd love you, if you would, to share one of your core desired feelings and how it's influenced how you've shown up, not just for your team, but for your family as well.
It might sound a little bit cliche, but the big one for me has been being authentic. And that authentic leader and the reason I say it's cliche is that it's talked about a lot out there. Whether it's done wholeheartedly by many people is another question, but it seems to be a bit of a buzzword. But it captures what I want to achieve. And I've figured out that being authentic leaders is great, because you can be yourself. You don't have to put on a persona, because I think that causes stress to you as well if you're trying to be whatever society is telling you you should be. But it also means you're going to have to get to grips with people questioning what you're doing. And all of a sudden you start, and it's a bit easier for me because I've been through a bit of a crisis where it's quite easy to come out and go, do you know what? I don't know how much time I've got left, so I'm going to be authentic, and I'm going to do what fills my cup up, and that will attract certain people, and it may not attract other people, and that's just how it is. And why should I worry about that? And I say that, and I think I'm a lot closer to that today, but I'm by no means all the way there, and I work on that all the time about being authentic, and hopefully my staff see that. And so that vulnerability that you bring to the table with your staff, being open, honest, if you believe in something that is a bit not the sort of well-trodden path, the wellness aspect, bringing in facilitators, talking about yoga and meditating, you can get a lot of eye rolls around the table, and I'm sure you know this far better than I would. You roll into a lot of corporates, and I'm sure that you've probably got a number of different people, some that roll their eyes and some that pretend they know what you're talking about and do nothing about it, and then probably some that buy in.
Yeah.
And so what I believe is that you keep the door open for your staff around that. Continue to give opportunities. Don't preach to them, but give them opportunities to be involved in things. And you never know when that light switch will happen. An example for us is we do lots of different things here. One of them is fortnightly yoga, and we do it during the day so that it's not in people's personal time. So for me, if you look at the nuts and bolts of it, I just think it's the most amazing opportunity. But that's me. You know, in my head, I'm like, you're being paid, and you're not paying for the yoga as well, and you get to come and walk out feeling amazing after. For me, it makes so much sense, and that's because I get something out of it, but I can't expect everyone to get something out of it. But we keep the door open for it, and however many people turn up, and no one's judged if they don't or looked down favorably upon. And also we put our hand up and say, what else do you want? What is going to make your life better? And what I've found that works the best for our staff, and I think probably for anyone, is being very tailored with your staff around that. It's not a one size fits all approach. Yeah. And we're really tailored with our staff. Some start later, some, there's all sorts of different things we've done for each of them to make their work-life balance as best as we can influence and can assist. Because I'm a big advocate now of not thrashing staff, but if your staff are happy, they're going to turn up and they're going to work a whole lot better. And especially if they respect you as well, they're going to work even harder. If you try to dictate to them, then they will work based off fear and based off having to hit results. And it's amazing as soon as you take that fear away and you start instilling really amazing values, that the results, they just come. Because people want to be there, and they're working because they're excited. They're not working because they're daunted by some horrible outcome that if you don't hit your target by the end of the month, that's going to sort of create all this huge pressure and everything else that goes with it. So yeah.
100%. When we are in fear, whether at home, in the community, or at work, we are in our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, freeze, which we cannot possibly be fully productive in. The opposite is the parasympathetic nervous system, as you know, which is our rest and digest. So by giving people the opportunity, and it's not just about yoga or meditation, but to have flexible work time, to be able to just go for a walk without, you watching the clock or anything like that. Those are all aspects of well-being. They are all mindful practices that allow people to recalibrate and to soothe their nervous systems and get back in balance into that parasympathetic nervous system mode, which allows us to operate at peak performance. So, you know that you and I know the value of pausing for our nervous system, and also to reflect. And so I would love to ask you a reflective question, and I'm sure you've been asked this by many people before. What is, you've given so much to us today, but what is the one key lesson that you've learned through cancer and COVID that you would share with others today?
Gosh, that's actually quite hard to sum everything up, I suppose. But
or maybe not one key, but just one that you would like to share today, one that's top of mind or really important for you right now.
Yeah, sure. And I suppose it's probably to the point we were making earlier. And again, it might sound a bit cliche, but it's about being true to yourself and following your path and really trying. And I really try this, and I still get caught up in it. And I think one of the key things out of all this is not sort of putting your hand up and saying, I've figured it out. I know everything and I know exactly how to live my life. That's never the case. And that's why the journey is pretty exciting, because you're always learning and you're always improving and you're always going through different ups and downs. And I'll lose it sometimes in certain situations. I'm not the ultimate boss. That's the just calmest Zen person in the world. I am as much as I can, but then there's also times. It's the same as when you're with your kids. You're super proud of yourself some days, and then other days it's too much. And you might do something like be a bit short or not give them the care or listen enough to them.
Mm.
And that's life. Nothing is perfect. But yeah, for me, it's about living with a true intention that you're following and you stick to it, and try not to listen to anyone that, when I say it's important to listen, but try not to live your life based off everyone else's ideas about how you should live it. And I learned that really heavily after, well, quite importantly, after being diagnosed, because we decided we're going to shift to the country and do all these different things, because we're like, why not? And I just stopped saying no to things.
Mm.
It was really interesting. And my wife was like, oh, let's go and live out in the country. And I was like, cool, let's go. And we started doing things like that, and we got questioned, and your family would be like, what are you doing? Why do you want to do that? And I'm like, because, mate, why not?
Mm.
What's the downside? We go there and we don't enjoy it, and we come back, and but I'll never know. And so that for me was living true to what I was feeling inside, rather than living based off what everyone else around me thought I should do, which was be in the house in the suburbs where I grew up. And it was more, maybe it was what people assumed was me,
Mm.
and maybe it wasn't. Maybe something else was going to improve my life. And so yeah, for me, the biggest one was learning to do what you do, and what people think of that is what they think of it, and don't live your life by that, or else you're always going to be in fight and flight and be unsatisfied, because you can't control anything that anyone else has to think about you. You control what you think about yourself. So that was a huge learning for me, and one that I'd definitely recommend to anyone. But again, like I say, I'm not perfect. I still have moments where I find myself thinking, I wonder what everyone else is thinking about what we're doing. And that's like that natural pre-wiring of ourselves that comes up.
Yeah.
And what we're doing out where we're building and doing different things, and trying to building a community facility and doing things that are sort of quite heart-led. And then some days you wake up and go, gosh, what are we doing? This is quite elaborate. I wonder if people drive past and think, oh, well, what are they doing? And we don't like what they're doing. And then I have to come back to, we know why we're doing things, and that's what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a quote from Danielle Laporte, who was the creator of the Design Map, which I love, because when you are really clear and in integrity with your values, your strengths, your desires, your authenticity, you create boundaries, and boundaries are fences that support your freedom. And I think, that's what you have done. You've created boundaries that aren't tall fences that keep other people out, but they are fences that support your freedom, allowing you to be authentic. And just before we started this talk, I pulled a little truth bomb. You might or you may not be able to read it in the background there.
Oh, I like it.
But to be authentic and to really stay the course to your true north, it really requires a stillness of mind and a presence, and that takes courage. And so I picked that one for you because I really think that it's what you embody, and it's what your team also see you for and thank you for. And I actually got in touch, unbeknown to you, to some of the people in your team, because you might be a leader that I love, but I wanted to talk to the people in your team about why they love you. And so I have some words to share with you about the leader that they think you are. So I'm going to read off a bit of paper here. This is a summary of comments from a few of your team members. Ant is positive and more motivated than ever to get on with life, to meet challenges and make a difference. No obstacle is too big for you to get your head around. Your commitment to the business goals is unwavering. Accountability, commitment, and grit are words used to describe you. And then these words in particular are from one of your directors, Brian, which, to be honest, I read and just went, I completely agree. The latest economic crisis has been a massive challenge on the whole 5/8 team, Ant has always been all over the business aspects, but it has been really nice seeing his compassionate side coming to the fore in what is a tough time for many. The way Ant handled his personal health issues remain to this day one of the most impressive shows of courage I have seen from anyone I know. He is 100% my go-to example of what can be achieved when you pair the right mindset with positive health and well-being changes. A bit emotional reading that out. It's just, what an impact you've had on people. And then this from your chairman, which is your dad. The Maori language has a wonderful word to describe what you have, which is mana. The English language struggles, but Murray believes the nearest is a leader with presence. And I completely agree. You have so much presence, and I am so glad that you are present, that you won your battle with cancer, and that you're here with us. You are a leader that I love and a friend that I really respect. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with us and everything that you do.
Thank you, Joe. No, you definitely caught me on the hop at the end there. And it's nice. It's nice to hear things like that, because you don't often talk, I suppose, honestly like that about each other. And so that's pretty moving, actually. So thank you. And yeah, I don't mind that you dug around in the background behind me, because that's actually really cool hearing things like that, because yeah, it's not very often you do. So thank you, and thanks for thanking me, and thanks for having me talk to you, because I'll take any chance to have a chat, and if it's something that can be used to, even if there's sort of little bits of what we've talked about that resonate with people, then that's really cool, and that's awesome. And if certain parts don't, one thing I've learned is I just take little bits from what I hear from people, and I just see what resonates with me, and I try and bring them into my life. And if they don't, then that's okay. That's their view, and that's fine. And yeah, so for me, it's just as empowering for me to talk, because you start forming even more ideas and passion about what you do by doing that. So I thank you for that.
You're so welcome. It is my pleasure. And it is June as we talk and as we record this, which is Bowel Cancer Awareness Month. So one last thing, is there anything else that you would like to add around that?
Yeah, well, it's amazing that it shouldn't really have to have a month, right? And I suppose none of these things should, but it is important to do a month because it's just a way of raising the profile. And so you get, for me, there's certain charities that benefit from really great profiles. And I think other charities like Breast Cancer Foundation and different ones have done an amazing job of creating huge buy-in, and as a result get great funding. And then that flows on to, as we all expect, better facilities and better awareness, and as a result lower rates of deaths or anything like that. And so bowel cancers always struggle with that, because people just don't want to talk about it, and I didn't want to talk about anything like that previously either. And it's amazing how now I don't really mind talking about anything. But as a male, you're taught any of that is not really something you talk about, and it's probably a sign of weakness. And so one of the key things I found, much like having this month, I didn't really want to talk about it a lot. Even after getting better, I sort of wanted to be treated like the old Ant again. And that happened. But the one thing I pushed myself to do was actually talk about it, talk to my friends. And it was amazing how many friends came out of the woodwork, a lot of guys who had never been able to talk about anything like this in their lives. And they were asking me, and I had to be really honest about things, quite private things. And I, you know what, after you've gone through having bowel cancer, none of that really phases you a huge amount. You've already been through something pretty massive that anyone else would fear massively. And so I was really open, and as a result, a lot of them went and got checks and this, and started doing all these amazing things. And then the New Zealand Herald wanted me to do a piece in it, and I was just like, no. First reaction, without even thinking, was I don't want to do that. I don't really want to be the poster guy for this or anything. And but then the more I thought it through, I was like, actually, this is a really great way to share. And even if one young person picks it up and goes, actually, I probably should get to the doctor and get a checkup, or I should do this, then that's going to be hugely helpful, especially when it's a young guy standing up talking about it. I think that's quite powerful. So pushing myself to do things like that's been great. And I think equally months they do, like this month of creating awareness, and they do December in December, which is great. So I don't know what I'll do because I've already got a beard. But I did that a while back. I did that 2 years ago, and it was amazing how much support I got. And all I did was grow a beard. It was hardly like I ran a marathon or anything. And I found that really inspiring, actually, because that was probably the last time I got a whole lot of feedback like you just gave me, because people poured in with, because you sort of, when you put a donation in, you had a certain number of words to say something, and generally they'd say something about you, which was quite cool. And it was often something you hadn't thought about for a while. And so that, having these times of the year to talk about certain things is just raising awareness, really, and talking about it is massively powerful and something that is really hard. We try and say that all of us guys should be, and look, I'm talking about guys because I'm a guy, but we should be more modern and open and talk about our feelings. And I'm trying my hardest to do that as well, but it's tough. It's very hard so opening up these conversations, and if I can be one of those persons to open up those conversations, then hopefully if I can inspire someone else to talk, then the ripple effect happens. If they start talking, their group starts talking, maybe their brothers and sisters talk more to each other. It just needs more people to do that. And if I can be that little cog in the wheel, then fantastic.
Yeah. So show up, stand tall, open up, connect, be honest with each other, get checked.
Totally. Yep. Everything you stand for sure. It's yep. And it's something that I just so wholeheartedly believe in. And so that's why it's so easy to talk about, because it's being, it's very much part of who I am today.
Well, thank you for being a leader and a person who has become so open and shares so much of your own story, your lessons, your advice. There's a lot of gold there, and it's been a great conversation. Great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joy.